Anticipation is in the air, and it has been now for a long little while. Now, as we know, a good few years ago, Mr. Murray did announce that Hello Games is working on the next big game, the next IP, the one that's going to be the predecessor to No Man's Sky. Now, the idea of this excited me so much at the time. However, it's been brewing in the community as of late that this could now be the time when the announcement trailer for said new game could be released. Now let me explain why. Now when No Man's Sky was first announced to the public, it was done so via the Golden Game Awards. Now for anybody who doesn't know, No Man's Sky is currently entered in this year's Golden Game Awards for the best community, and right now you can go ahead and vote against other games. Obviously right now they are just nominated, but they do stand a good chance of winning. Now with this all being said, why could this be such a big deal? Now the game currently stands at 8 years old, which has been an amazing run for Hello Games, the company. Now most games, when they reach this age, that's nearly a decade, 2 years shy of a decade. Now when most games reach this kind of level of age, they even do a remaster in some cases. They're eligible for a remaster. So we know that Hello Games isn't gonna hold on just solely to No Man's Sky forever. Things will need to move on. Now with 8 years being said, and we know with confirmation from Mr. Murray that the next IP is being made, I believe that this could be the year at the very end to really leave us on a cliffhanger here at the Golden Game Awards, where the original No Man's Sky was first announced, that the next game from Hello Games will also be announced. Think about it. Now my theory behind all this is, over the last few years of development, especially within the No Man's Sky ecosystem, we've had very questionable updates. A lot of them have been absolutely amazing, others not so much. I firmly believe the technology and the improvements that they have implemented and designed in No Man's Sky has been a precursor to what they are planning in this new IP. Let's break this down. So first of all, they have the Havoc engine, all designed in-house, and recently, and it was in the experimental patch notes as of very late, that they are also upgrading this very engine. Why would they be upgrading an engine like this far into development after 8 long years? It makes no sense, unless they was upgrading it to test out new features that they want to implement in the next game. Secondly, let's talk about procedural generation. No Man's Sky has been the best game and the only game that implements it in the way that it does. No other game, for example, Starfield, boss that is going to have, procedural generation, this, that, and the next thing, and it can't even scratch the surface on what No Man's Sky can currently do. 8-year-old game, I might also add. So they're going to be adding all of these technology pieces, so this procedural generation, the Havoc engine, they're going to be taking this over to the next game, because you wouldn't invest millions and millions and millions of pounds, and it costs that quite easily, and probably way more, to develop these new technologies, get them perfect, and implemented into the game. Now, they're not going to do that just for one game, and then start from scratch on the next game. No company does that. So essentially, we can start deducing that the next big IP from Hello Games will share many of the core technologies that we are currently enjoying in No Man's Sky right now. So we can speculate that the next game is going to be running on a updated and improved Havoc engine, maybe Havoc Engine 2. They could also implement full procedural generation once more. And if we start breaking down all of the other components to No Man's Sky, we have things like water physics, we have the exocraft. Now the exocraft themselves are hit or a miss, but it's the exocraft, what they represent. Now, they represent full-on vehicle mechanics that drive smooth and behave and act like vehicles should, and that is very hard to do in games. Let's look at the Nautilon, for example. By all definitions, that is a submarine, and it works fully with water physics, and you can dive and do all sorts of stuff in the Nautilon, but that has to all be fully backed up with in-game physics, high calculation numbers, and a solid vehicle mechanical foundation, which again we can assume that the next game will be fully utilizing. But we can also use the mechanics that don't really get a lot of polish or a lot of attention to also our advantage here. So for a full example, recently I made a video where I essentially break through the skybox in space, and it was a whole thing and it glitched out my game and whatnot. But Hello Games never really paid much attention to the very space aspect of No Man's Sky, and what I mean by that is the skybox that surrounds where you can see the stars and you can see the sun. And, you know, they never really implemented anything that, for example, you can get in your ship, fly in a straight line for 6 hours, but eventually reach the sun. They never did anything like that. They never procedurally generated that far out into space, and they never really coded for that. So we can safely assume that the next game will not really have in detailed mechanics like that, which could mean that the next game isn't necessarily going to be all about space travel. It might not even be a space game. Let that sink in. And even if we look now at the different classes of ships, so you've got your explorer, you've got your fighters, you know, just the classes of ships. I know that with ships themselves you can have all different procedural generated parts for them and colors and everything else, but we just look at just the core amount of ships, classes that we have in 8 years of development. It does seem a little on the lighter side in my personal opinion. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. But with 8 years of full development, does that mean that they are going to take the ship aspect and take it over to the next game? I don't think they are. I don't think it's going to be a spaceship that they're going to take over to the next game. But we can also reverse this and say, well, you know what? They've put a lot of time, which they have, into things like the flight mechanics of the ship, the way that they move through the atmosphere. Again, this is all very technical and highly coded stuff that will need a heck of a lot of polish to get right, especially in atmosphere and the way the ship behaves in space. So they might be able to use the mechanics elsewhere. Now, will it be spaceships per se? I'm not going to put my entire bet behind that. But what they could do is, if it's a game about, you know, just on an actual planet, like maybe something like world size maybe, then what they could do is implement that into your normal standardized kind of planes that we see today, fighters, that kind of thing. They could implement the mechanics in much different ways, but the foundations of which they're built from is definitely usable. Now, the only thing that concerns me about the next game from them, and it's just because it's such a persistent problem in No Man's Sky, is the multiplayer. You probably already guessed what I'm going to say on this, but it is the multiplayer aspect. I'm just hoping that the technology that they can bring to the table, because hopefully it is all next gen stuff, that the multiplayer problems that they do face currently in No Man's Sky could be virtually eradicated within the next game. I just hope they get that part right, or they could go down the different option like Starfield has done, which I hope not, because I like multiplayer when it works. But they could choose to go down the route of a solo play experience, or at very maximum a co-op experience, not so much a massive multiplayer online thing. But I hope they don't do that, and I really hope that they work on multiplayer and not just take the easier route and just get rid of it. So with everything being said here today, we know that a lot of the technologies are going to be carried over to the next game. It has to be. And there is a lot of technologies that I've only just scratched the surface on with this video, because I could talk about this all day, about every single mechanic that No Man's Sky has and what Hello Games have implemented and how it really could change a lot of things. Now, if we only take it as face value of they're just going to bring in certain parts into the next game, what could be the next game? What could it be about? Now, there could be 1,000,001 different directions, but if we take some small dash here of creative licensing, then if I was a betting man, it would be, in my mind, a open world kind of game. And with the procedural engine and the way that they have built it, I can assume it's going to be a world without any barriers. And maybe it is kind of like a Earth-sized planet, you know, where if, for example, if you could fly around the planet from one end to the other, it would take you, 24 hours in real life or something. You know, giant continents. And I'm hoping that everybody who can join and play in this game could also be part of like a massive multiplayer online system, so it means everyone's online at the exact same time. Think of like World of Warcraft, for example, where you have like the 2-3 islands, but it's always populated and you have different servers, granted, but you see everybody and everyone's doing quests and missions and everything else. I'm thinking maybe not like the style of World of Warcraft, not by any means, Jesus, but the mechanical function of World of Warcraft. Now that could be a thing. So massive multiplayer online, we can see everybody with a dash of No Man's Sky mechanics. So for example, how we see our characters now, like in third person or in first person, and the way that we see the landscape as it is like when we're on planets. Maybe something like that, maybe something a bit more upgraded, but we can all see the same thing, and we can all see when a new part is procedurally generated for the first time. We can all see that, if that makes sense. So everyone gets the same thing without it being a complete mess, because again, No Man's Sky at the minute, procedural generation, it is a hit or a miss especially when you're doing multiplayer, but it could be such a big thing. So open world, procedurally generated, maybe the same size as the planet, openly expand on more vehicles, mechanics, with like, for example, water physics. Now we know that they do have water physics in No Man's Sky, so maybe they could do something with that where you could start sailing around the entire world if you wanted to. I mean, that would be really cool. I think it's going to be a big open world game. It could be sandbox, but it could also be quest or story driven as well. So let me know your thoughts about what you think the next game could be from Hello Games. Do you think it's going to be a No Man's Sky 2, quite literally a No Man's Sky 2? Or do you think they're going to go down a different road and take the technologies that they've been designing and implementing into No Man's Sky and update them and bring them forward into the next game? Let me know where you sit with that. Let me know what you think is going to be the next game. What do you think it's going to even be called? What do you think is going to be in it? Let me know all of your theories, comment section down below. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is everything from me here today. And as always, my name is Professor Cynical, and I'll catch you all again in the next one. Bye for now.